Hi there, my name's Graham Duplessis. I'm the head of brand and marketing here at Factory Berlin, and this is our Founder Focus interview series, where we talk to startup founders from the Factory Berlin community to learn a little bit more about the journey of a founder and to get insight in the ups and downs of building your own business. Today, I'm joined here with Mr. Michael Usher, the founder of CoFound and the Usher Agency. Hi, Michael. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, Graham. Good to see you.
So maybe as a starting point, before we talk about the Usher Agency, you can maybe take us back to the very beginning of your founder journey. Where did it start for you?
Yeah, so I started off as a business English teacher here in Berlin, and I did that for years until I was able to transition from that to consulting, because a lot of my students actually wanted me to check out a lot of their work and for marketing and communications. Mm-hmm. And I did that also for a couple of years and was able to work for some really high profile companies. Cool. And one of my students or clients asked me to work for a company. She gave me the position of communication head. I was head of the communications department. And funny enough, the guy who left, he worked there for 8 years, and he went to go work for a startup. Uh-huh. So the interesting thing is, within my sort of, in Germany you call it Probeseite, mm-hmm. he decided to come back because he was done with startups. Okay. And it was really, for obvious reasons, I had to go. Mm-hmm. And in that period, I had to actually figure out whether I wanted to go back to consulting, because a lot of my clients, I left them and I didn't have the opportunity to go back. But
so maybe you can take us back to when you first moved to Berlin. What kind of brought you here, and what was it like when you first started living life in the city?
So when I first came to Germany, actually, I went to Stuttgart. So I originally started there, okay. And just because I was curious, it was for me, it was two things that were really important at that time, and that was love and curiosity, to be quite honest. Okay. And I just remember an experience that I had early on in Germany with a friend of mine who invited me over to his parents, and so immediately when I walked in the door, his mom gave me an apron and I had to start cutting potatoes. Okay. And it was such an amazing experience because, it was a large family, two sisters and 3 brothers. And we were in the kitchen just sort of peeling potatoes and cooking and laughing and listening to Edith Piaf in the background. Mm-hmm. And this was sort of my first introduction to Germany and to Europe. Cool. And I just remember feeling so welcomed and so embraced by them. Mm-hmm. And that was sort of my first introduction into Germany. And fast forward, when I moved to Berlin, I was so just enamored by how creative and how open and how just so progressive Berlin was. Mm-hmm. And I was also quite impressed that, they elected their first female chancellor, who I'm a huge fan of. And it just felt like at that time, I was in the right place at the right time. And that was awesome.
There's lots of people building businesses in Berlin.
Yeah.
And I think it's sometimes interesting to understand how the location itself maybe it kind of comes through in the companies that are built here, the teams that are built here. So maybe what's your experience of that? How is the city a good place for building community and building relationships with people?
Yeah, well, I think the city's open. In my experience, it's always embraced me from day one, and and I think that the city itself just is able to, or at least it makes you feel welcomed. Mm-hmm. And with that spirit, I think you can really do anything. You can create anything, and I feel like that's fundamental to a creative hub, much like Factory too. Mm-hmm. Factory is. If you ask me, Factory is the standard for the startup ecosystem in Berlin, or should be the standard. I think it is, thanks. But it's definitely the standard. And in my experience, coming to Factory and becoming a member here has really helped quite a lot.
Maybe you can tell us a little bit about CoFound. I think it's a really cool project that you're running, really cool business that you're running. Kind of how does it work? What is CoFound?
Well, I'll go back a bit before I talk about CoFound,
Sure.
because my journey in Berlin began with Berlin Startup Academy and Click.
Okay.
So, as I said before, I started off as a business English teacher, then transitioned into consulting, and sort of fast forward in that time period while I was, figuring out what I wanted to do. I did some research about the startups community in Berlin. And I looked up an accelerator program called the Berlin Startup Academy. And I wrote them an email. And I was curious because they had a startup program coming up, and I was curious, and I wanted to find out what they were up about. So I wrote them an email asking them if I could come in and pitch some ideas. And he sent me an email right back, Christoph, and what I did was I came in and I pitched him an idea that I had. And mind you, I had a sheet full of ideas. So you had
to choose just one.
I had to choose one, but I pitched the idea to him, and he said to me, "Thanks for coming in, but that's not going to fly. We've got 9 companies that we have to choose out of hundreds that have applied, and thanks for coming in, Michael." And so I went home and decided to write him another email and said, I've got another idea, Christoph. Would you mind hearing it out? And he said yes. And so I came in the next day and I pitched him one of my many ideas, but the second idea. And he rejected me again and said, thanks for coming in again. But then he stopped and he said, but there's something about you. I think that you should join my program, but with an idea that I've been thinking about doing, but I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to have you join my program with this idea. Okay. And I'm not one to shy from an opportunity. So I said yes. And I ended up joining the program, being one of the 9 founders in this competition. Okay. So a month into the program, I came to him and I said, Christoph, I'm not feeling this. This is not me. This is not my why. This is not something that I believe in. This is just, it doesn't connect with me. But I've got this other idea. Would you mind listening to it? And he kind of rolled his eyes and said, yeah, okay. And I told the story like this. I saw a guy walking down the street and he pulled out his car keys and chirper, or whatever you want to call it. And he chirped, and what he did was he unlocked his bicycle lock and not his car. Okay. And he got up out of his seat and was like, that's the best idea I've heard in years. You need to join my program with that idea, Michael, because that's it. That's the one. Okay. And I was really hesitant because I didn't, it was just an idea. A lot of the other founders were so much more ahead of me. And so I ended up joining the program with that idea, Click. Yeah. And it was a 6-month program. And so I went through it and I ended up winning the program. And I won the Deutsche Telekom 5,000 euro Hubraum award. Brilliant. And I was sort of thrust into the Berlin startup scene from that point on. And it was written about by a number of different publications. And it was really awesome, So.
Awesome. And so that was your first successful business. That was Click. What happens from there? You've reached a lot of success. Like you said, you've got really good coverage. The business is doing well. What's the next step for you in your founder journey? How do you, find the next opportunity?
Well, it's interesting because we weren't successful at all at that time. We were just starting out. Okay. So I had managed to come up with a sort of a rough prototype. And there's a video somewhere about my pitch, which was awful, but it was still, I was able to sort of produce a little prototype. And from that point on, it was just about finding my engineer, my co-founder, to help me build out the product and really figure out how I was going to communicate this, because it was a brand new concept. Even IoT at the time wasn't as big as it is now, smart, interconnected or connected products. And it was about sort of spreading the word and trying to get the message out there. Okay. And so from that point on, I sort of tried to get it funded and figure out, who was going to be my co-founder. And So it became a really interesting journey. But around that same time, I'll sort of segue into CoFound. Around that same time, I was going to a lot of different startup community events, right?
Yeah.
And what I noticed was there was a lot of I call them top-down events, where there's the heads sitting on stage, talking to, the startup founders, giving them great advice, but not really connecting with them.
Okay.
And there wasn't really a community or event that I felt was for founders by founders. And I saw the opportunity and I said, you know what, I'm going to create an event series that's ran by founders, for founders, called CoFound. And the idea was also interesting. People always ask me what my secret sauce was. And I didn't really have a secret sauce, but I did have a very specific method. The idea was to, how you would go to many different startup events and 10% of the event in the beginning is a little bit of networking and business card transactions. And then, 10% at the end is the same thing, right? With some beer. And then 80% in the middle is, a talk or a keynote content, or something like that. And so what I did was, and this was very intentional, I decided to flip it on its head and focus 90% on networking and 20% on content. And and people loved it. They would leave the event and say, I found my co-founder, or I found some really great resources and some opportunities. And it just became quite amazing. Yeah.
Awesome. And I mean, did the idea kind of just came to you from identifying maybe what there was this need in startup events, but was it also maybe was there anything from when you were building Click that kind of informed the way that you would continue with CoFound?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I learned early on that there are 4 key elements to success as a founder, right? And that's information, that's access, that's resources, and that's funding. And the way that I always approached it was any founder, any startup that are able to, acquire those 4 elements as quickly as possible, because, as you know, it's a race, right? We're all racing against our peers and the market, obviously. And so any, founder or community that's able to acquire those as quickly as possible win. And for me, my whole journey has always been about trying to creatively acquire those things, as with whatever let's say creativity I have. And what I notice is that just acquiring information is not enough. Just acquiring access is not enough. Just acquiring resources is not enough. And funding in particular. Oftentimes you hear people say, well, yeah, those guys did it because, they just got money really quickly. And, the other guys did it because somehow they're just smarter, or, where there's dumb money out there, right? And there's also bad information, which could also hinder your process as a founder. So when I say get there as quickly as possible, just acquiring it is not enough. So you've got to also acquire the right amount of knowledge and the right smart money. So
it's about kind of offering a balance of these 4 things. That's amazing. So CoFound was kind of founded around this event concept. We had Summit Factory, really successful, great community that's kind of building around that. And then last year we had COVID-19, which of course put a stop to a lot of those in-person events, those in-person networking opportunities. How did that shape the way that you move forward with CoFound, or just with your community that you'd started building there?
Yeah, well, I mean, it did definitely, for sure. It put it at a stop. But lucky for me, I was able to sell the community in 2019 to one of my sponsors, a marketing company. And so it was always a process of how we're going to elevate CoFound together, us as a team, and what would be the next steps. Cool. And when COVID hit, it was obvious that the event series wasn't really going to go anywhere, unfortunately. So that gave me an opportunity to think about what was next for myself. And I started a quarantine project I called Self-Made. You can go to self-madeshop.com. And the idea was really a call to inspire founders, because I know that because if you can imagine, from one day to the next, founders are out there hustling, trying to get their brand out there, trying to get people to care. And then, the next day they're stuck at home with their brilliant ideas. So self-made has really been kind of like self-made was sort of founded on this principle of trying to inspire founders and to kind of be a daily reminder. So I have I call it the Berlin-based self-empowerment brand for the creator in you.
Okay.
And it was inspired by a company in America called Successories. My father took me there when I was younger, and it's kind of like a motivational business stationery company where you would walk in and you'd see plaques that say success and leadership and teamwork, with like a bald eagle, and some really like famous quote by somebody. Okay. But it really left an impression on me. I walked in and I was like, I can become successful. And I just remember that feeling that I had when I was a kid. And self-made is kind of an answer to a more modern Berlin version of Successories. Okay. So it's designed to kind of, all the products are designed to kind of be like a self-motivator, like a daily self-motivator to keep going while you're at home, quarantine, keep going, don't give up, and to keep creating. So
I love that. That's such a cool message. Yeah. Where can self-madeshop.com.
Exactly.
I've remembered it. I'll go check it out later. And so that's still running. I mean, are there any other projects that you're working on at the moment?
Yeah. So aside from my quarantine project, I over the years at CoFound, I've always been asked to because a lot of companies were asking me, so how did you do what you've done? Can you help me build my community? This is amazing. You were able to build a community of 15,000 people, of course, in over 8 years, but it grew and sustained over that time. And I've always had a method to my madness. I just sort of kept my notes and kept it to myself all these years. Okay. And as you can imagine, being on the ground with the founders, like really getting to know them and understanding their stories and their challenges, I got a really great picture into their stories and into their journeys. And, obviously when CoFound didn't happen in 2020 and, it was just an opportunity. I started working with a creative agency to help formulate my story, my brand, and my method. And so that is today the Usher Agency. Okay, cool. And the Usher Agency is really a community-based consultancy. Okay. Community building consultancy. And we have a unique 0 to 5 method that is really all about what I did for CoFound, which is getting to the core of your truth. And when I say your truth, a lot of people, when they see 0 to 5, they think, but I'm a successful company, or I've got a number of different followers, I already have a community. I'm not necessarily 0. Okay. Zero really is about ground zero, where you are now. Right? Oftentimes, I think community is looked at from a very bottom-up approach. So let's get funding, let's hire a community builder, and just build up from there. I think community should really be a top-down approach. So it should start from the founders and really get to the heart of what their truth is and what their why is. And that's basically what I do. I mean, I come up with I have a very strategic way of getting the founders to realize what their truths are, and then being able to sort of extract their why, and then whether they have an existing community or not, either build a bridge to their current community, or help them to really define their belief system, because in the end, the message that you're sending out to your community is, I believe this, these are my values, and I would like for you to believe that too. And unfortunately, those messages get mixed, and they don't often translate as well as we would like them to. Okay. And so my whole core, because for CoFound, that was at the core of everything I did for CoFound.
Yeah.
I knew why I was doing it. I knew that I was also a founder. I had the same problem and issues that they did. I believed in the community, and I had a very clear why.
Yeah.
And so I would like to help other companies do the same thing, because I really do believe that's where it begins.
That's so exciting. I actually just read an article the other day, and you might have also seen it, and it was talking about community washing, and kind of taking that concept, which is greenwashing, where companies kind of use the brand of being green or environmentally friendly,
right.
But not really living it through.
Right.
And it's interesting that you talk about that, because I think a lot of companies and businesses nowadays like kind of trying to use community building, but they're not exactly, as you said, they're not building it in their core. They're using it more as a veneer. So I think it's really awesome that you're kind of working with brands and businesses to kind of avoid that happening.
Yeah.
What's next for the Usher Agency, or just in general? I mean, your story is amazing. It's got so many different twists and turns and lots of different projects and businesses that you're working on. Do you have any idea for what's next, or do you kind of just play it by ear, take what comes?
Yeah. What's next is world domination now. What's next is really, just to spread that message,
Yeah.
that message. I think it's the first time that, at least that I've seen through my research, that anyone has positioned an agency from that perspective.
Yeah.
And so it's about spreading that message, getting companies to see that the value of doing that, especially post-COVID or during COVID, because our behaviors have changed, right? Our whole, concept of what we are as consumers have changed. And so I think it's really a call to companies to answer that, and to see if they're actually engaging with their community, to see if they're still speaking their community's language.
For sure.
And so, so I'd like to, I've been so humbled, honestly, by the amount of response that I've gotten since launching the Usher Agency, because obviously from CoFound, people know me from CoFound for the past 8 years, but to be able to put it and formulate it into a very clear message and method on my site, people are able to, they're understanding it and they're getting it, which is awesome.
Awesome. And I mean, everyone go check it out, follow you, kind of follow that story as well. I think it's a really brilliant one. Thanks so much for the chat.
Awesome.
It's been really nice to get to know you, get to know your journey. We always end the Founder Focus interview format with this one question. And I think you've already explained that there are lots of different things that founders need. So this might be a harder question. But is there maybe one piece of advice that you would give to an aspiring entrepreneur or founder that might be watching this? One piece of advice that they should take on board when building their business. Yeah.
Don't be afraid to ask. But I'll also quote Mahatma Gandhi. It goes, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. And I'm giving you a little nugget here, because this has honestly been my blueprint for everything that I've done. And I'll explain. So oftentimes founders believe that if they build a product or service that, because they believe in it, everyone's just going to love it and it's going to be the best thing ever, right? The truth is no one cares.
Yeah.
They ignore you. So you've got to make them care. You've got to make them see what you see. The second part is then they laugh at you, right? So once you've gotten them to care, right? And then you've gotten them to sort of engage with your product. They won't understand it, and they'll look at it like, what is this? I've seen this before, they'll sort of laugh at what you've done, unfortunately. And so you've got to make them actually believe what you believe. The third part is, then they fight you, right? So once you've convinced them to buy your product and engage with your, or service, then they'll challenge every aspect of that product, right? They may not like all the features. They may not like the color. They'll look at it and flip it around and right. So, but that's gold.
Yeah,
that's your opportunity as a founder to iterate, to pivot, to perfect the product for the customer, right? And And then if you're able to do that and come up with a really great MVP or something that's just amazing, right? For the customer, by the customer, if you will, then you might have a chance to win. So I'll say this, right? So in order to do that, you have to know why you're doing it. You have to know what you believe in, and you have to know who you're communicating to. For them to be evangelists, for them to really believe in your product and want to engage with you, they need to know who you are. They need to know what you're all about. And that's what I do at the Usher Agency. I help you figure out who you are so that you can help your customers.
Amazing. That is some dynamite wisdom there. Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you, Graham.
Cheers.
Cheers.